So today, I would like to introduce to you Okan Bulut, who is an associate professor from the Department of Educational Psychology from the Faculty of Education. And the title of his talk, as you might have seen, is Generating Effective Feedback from Online Assessments. Please take it away, Okan.
All right, thank you so much. And again, it's good to be here. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to present. This is an area that I'm just working on I've been working on for the last few years. And because again, I always believe that our teaching and instruction is kind of giving us some ideas about our research as well. And that was one of those cases for me. So in this case, I also cited my students here who helped me just help me in this project, and they are still helping me actually analyze some further data. I will mention those later in the presentation. So, all right, and I just put my contact information here in case if you have any further comments, questions about this presentation, feel free to just email me after this session. And if you don't have any time for Q&A, so I'll be happy to just answer them after today's session. All right, so why online assessment? So that's going to be my starting point. Basically, even before the COVID hit, I was using online assessments in my courses because they are great compared to paper and pencil assessments, traditional assessments, because they provide us with more diversity in terms of item format. For example, I can use multiple choice, true, false, matching questions, short answer items, essays, all in one place, and without sacrificing the format of the test. And I can also just embed additional components, right? It could be visuals, it could be videos, it could be sounds, things like that. And once students just take an online assessment, especially if you are using selected response formats such as multiple choice, true, false, the marking or scoring will be done simultaneously. So as soon as they finish the exam, the marking is already done, so you don't have to touch your hands on anything. So basically it is objective and quick marking. And also we know that in online assessments, there are additional features that we could possibly use, such as randomizing the positions of questions, even response options within a test, so that the students don't see the questions in the same order. Even if they just see the same question, they just see different response options in different positions. So that also increases response, the test security significantly. And also, I don't know, probably some of you have been already just working on this, but we also know that like systems such as eClass give us additional data on students' test-taking behavior, such as like response time. So we know how much time students spent on each question and how much total time they just spent for taking the test. We also know when they just change their responses. There are some log records in the eClass system. So you can always go back and check the database to find out whether students change their answers from, for example, like right to wrong, wrong to right, sometimes wrong to wrong. So they keep changing their responses. So it may happen. So you can just look at those additional indicators in your data set. But then how do we just link online assessments back to feedback? So how can we use online assessments to generate effective feedback? So from the feedback literature, we know that there are certain characteristics of effective feedback, and I only listed a bunch of them. These are the ones that I think that are most important to us as instructors and also for students as well. So first of all, the feedback has to be really timely. So we know that feedback should be given probably right after the exam or pretty soon after that, not necessarily like a couple of weeks later or a month later or at the end of the term. Otherwise, it doesn't really matter. So the content of the feedback has to be both positive and negative. So meaning that only praising your students, just saying thumbs up, good job, doesn't do it. So obviously, we also need to just highlight both strengths and also the weaknesses that they need to address before they move on to the following exams in the course. The feedback also should be as detailed as possible. So it doesn't mean that the feedback should be lengthy or really verbose in that case, but it has to be detailed enough to explain what do you mean with those strengths and weaknesses, what they need to do, and what are the things that they need to study before their final exams or subsequent exams in the course. And finally, probably the most important piece is that the feedback has to be personalized. Just providing a generic feedback to all of your students will just do some good, but not good enough probably. So still it has to be personalized enough so that everybody, each student learns from that personalized feedback enough so they know what their strengths and weaknesses are. Again, they are specific to each individual. So they will just create a work plan, a study plan, or they will just decide what to do next based on that personalized feedback in that case. So using those principles, I wanted to create a system that's going to allow me just generate automatic feedback. So because I've been using online assessments, especially for large size courses with more than 100 students in them. So in that case, I needed a system that would help me generate feedback, but not like any feedback, really high quality, detailed, timely, and personalized feedback. In that case, I wanted to just create a feedback system that will allow me to just give students their total scores, but also some sub-scores for each content area. So that those content areas could be your lessons, they could be the units that you are covering. Typically in my classes, I'm using my lectures as a unit when I split my scores. So I tell students, for example, like what their total score is and what their sub-scores are for each content area, so they know in which areas they did better or worse. The feedback format, so I wanted to just give feedback in two different formats because I know that as a visual learner, I really like data visualizations, graphics, colorful things to convey the message that I'm hoping to convey. So I really like those. But in the meantime, I know that not everybody really likes visualizations. So in that case, I wanted to combine both data visualizations and written feedback together. So if people need to just read it, so they can read it. If they need to look at the visualizations, they can go ahead and see their performance or feedback visually in that case. And finally, when it comes to the level of detail, so I wanted to just give them feedback on each content area. Like I said, it could be lectures, it could be topics that you are covering. And also I wanted to just give them some ideas on each question that they are responding. So in my case, and probably that applies to most of us, so when we just create an exam, probably students will want to know about individual questions. However, in my case, I don't want to release all of my questions to students and start over preparing my exam again next year. So that's not kind of like a sustainable approach to assessment, obviously, at least in my opinion. So that's why instead of releasing the questions back to the students, I'm releasing some key concepts based on each question. So those key concepts are the concepts that underlie that question. So you need to know that concept to answer that question correctly. So in that case, if you are not able to answer that question correctly, obviously you did not learn that key concept precisely or accurately enough. So that's why I was hoping to just let them know what that key concept or key concepts are, so then they can go back and just study those again in the lecture slides rather than focusing on one question in the exam. Because sometimes from my experience, it creates an illusion. So students may see their feedback on an individual question, so they find it helpful, and I think it is helpful, but in some cases they think that it's good enough. So now I know why I missed that question. I get it. I will move on. But to me, they need to go back and study further. And this is how I encourage them or motivate them to do it. So that brings me back to the system that we are using right now, but I will show you an earlier version of it. So like I said, after I decided to just create an automated feedback system, I created something on my own. So I wrote a short program to give some feedback. In this system, what the starting point is to create an assessment blueprint. In this blueprint, so I only gave you a snapshot of my blueprint in one of my classes in the past couple of years. So basically, I list every single question. That was an Excel file. I literally copied and pasted it over to my slide. So for each question, I label each question or tag them based on the lectures that they are associated with. And I also have another column that indicates what that question really covers in terms of key concepts. So for example, I know that in this case, question 1 comes from my lecture 2, And the key concept underlying that question is the difference between learning outcomes and instructional objectives, things like that. Or question 2 is linked to lecture 1, and it was about measurement error in my lectures. So that's why the students need to just go back and take a look at lecture 1 to better understand what measurement error means. But this is something that I just created even before administering the exam. So I have a better idea about how many questions I have from each section of from each lecture in this case, and what are the key concepts that I'm covering in my exam. That also helped me create a more balanced exam in my case, because I was able to see if I'm really covering the important concepts or not. Using that blueprint, so what used to happen is that students used to go ahead and write their exams at the Learning Assessment Center on the 3rd floor of our building in the Faculty of Education, or maybe in their home. So like if you're running the exam, just like we are doing it right now, they could just do it literally in their own computers. But typically we were using the Learning Assessment Center as a computer-based testing center in that case to administer the exams. So students just write the exam. So once the exam period is over, I used to just go ahead, open up my eClass, find that exam, click on responses, download the data. So all the responses that students just gave, and if there are no open-ended questions, obviously all the questions will be already marked. If there are some open-ended questions, you will mark them manually, then you can download the responses. But at least you will get some data like 1, 0 for correct, incorrect, or if you're marking them on a rubric or scale, so it's going to be 0, 1 to 3 points or something like that for each question. Then I was getting that data, I was cleaning that up a little bit, and I was using the program that I wrote using the R programming language and dump all the data into that program. And that program would create individualized score reports for each student. And the program at the end would email every single student independently by using that report as an attachment. So it was a fun process. I was literally emailing 140 students and adding those attachments one by one. Again, my system was doing it. I've never done it manually, but at least setting up the system was really exciting. And I thought that, wow, this is great. So, and like, how can I just really just expand this later on? But let me just show you the report that I created at that time before we just come to the point that like now, like what we are using right now. So this is a sample report that I created at that time using the system that I just showed you. This was for EDPY 303. This is an undergrad course with at least 120 students in the section, and sometimes there are even more students. So my report just summarizes like how they did on their first midterm, basically. So this is a PDF document, 7 pages. It summarizes how they just performed on the exam. After they just passed this cover page, they got a report, something like this. And all the text in the report was automatically generated by the program that I wrote. So basically it was just adding this template sections, dear blah, blah, blah. In that case, this is your report. This is how you did it. This is your total score. This is how the rest of the class did. So you can see yourself relative to others. This is how you did in lecture 1, 2, 3, and 4, in addition to your overall performance. And you can compare yourself with the rest of the class by looking at those bar graphs that you are seeing on the right-hand side. So, and that was quite helpful because, again, students are just seeing this kind of visual feedback along with some text. It was really helpful. And in addition, I just provided some textual feedback by letting them know about each lecture. Basically, I said, if the student just did very well on a particular lecture or questions related to that lecture, I gave them some kind of positive feedback, just saying that good job, you've done great. So we covered this content and it seems that you learned it very well, so you are good to go. Or we covered this content in these lectures, but it seems that you did not really perform very well. Maybe you may want to just check out the concepts that I'm highlighting at the end of this report. And if you still have any questions, just come to me or just teaching assistants, things like that. And the content was, again, automatically generated in that case by using that kind of binary system, whether they are just good, above a certain threshold or below. So I'm giving them either a positive feedback, just saying that good job, or some kind of encouraging feedback just to say that, hey, maybe your performance could have been better. Why don't you study this? And at the end of the report, you will see that I'm highlighting the key concepts for each lecture based on the questions that they missed or answered incorrectly on the exam. So for example, this particular student So probably answered one question incorrectly, which focused on goals of classroom assessment from lecture 1. So in that case, student knows that when he or she needs to study for the final exam, then they need to go back, take a look at the lecture materials for lecture slides for lecture 1, take a look at the area or part that I'm talking about goals of classroom assessment, for example. So this is how I just identified the areas that they need to study further before they come to the final exam. And I will show you a bunch of emails that I got from my students after I just send them this PDF reports. So students are super happy. So I think that the expectation is so low about multiple choice exams and even online exams, so that they were so happy that they got some useful report based on their performance. And I think the most exciting part for me is that they knew the point of this report. They mentioned that now I know what to do in the upcoming exams, and I know what to study in the next part. So this is really helpful. Even for a multiple choice exam, I got lots of feedback. So they were super happy. So that was encouraging to me. So I wanted to just scale this up and share it with my colleagues on campus, with everybody else, so that for that reason, I decided to just expand it to eClass. So that brings us back to today, to the program that we call ExamViz. And I provided the link over here. So that link will take you all the instructor's guide and additional instructional videos that I created about ExamViz, how to set it up, because today I will have only limited time to go over the details of ExamViz. But basically, ExamViz does what I was previously doing on my own on eClass. So now you don't have to manually download anything. So you just set up everything that I just showed you so far through eClass, and then your students just get an online score report rather than a PDF. So basically, this is the process that I'm following. So basically, once I create a course, I add the ExamViz plugin to my eClass page. That eClass plugin recognizes you as the instructor, and it recognizes students as students, so that they see their feedback, but you see the system that you can go ahead and change things. So that part is good. So you can create a quiz on eClass. So that's what it's called on eClass, an exam basically, but a quiz. So the quiz may consist of multiple choice items, true, false, open-ended. It doesn't really matter what type of questions you use, but you need a certain number of questions to be able to cover your exam, obviously. And the format doesn't really matter too much, but the exam should not be a single question essay, for example. So it's not like ExamViz doesn't work for those type of exams. So in my case, my general suggestion is that you select at least 3 content areas to cover, because if you have only 2 of those visualizations that I showed you earlier, they don't look very good. So at least 3 or more content areas based on your lectures, based on the topics that you covered, that's that. And also I recommend that you put at least 3 questions to cover each content area. So obviously all of our exams are like 20, 30 questions, right? So they are not like really short, but at the same time, sometimes I see colleagues, let's say, defining a content category that is only linked to a single question. That's not going to work, because if students fail on that question, they will get 0% when they see their report. That's a big, big no, because in that case, students get really anxious when they see like, hey, did I get 0% on this area? So that's really discouraging in that case. So what I do is that after I specify my content areas, maybe using an Excel file like the one that I showed you earlier, then I move the questions into these categories. And I also just define at least one key concept for each question. And all of these procedures are happening directly on eClass. No external programs, nothing. And once you are done, so you open your exam and click on categories to see what you just did. So I will just show you an example from one of my classes that I tried last fall. So that was a graduate level course, and I created 3 content areas. I labeled them as lecture 1, lecture 2, lecture 3. The numbers in the inside the parentheses right next to them, they represent the number of questions. So basically I have 8 questions from lecture 1, 8 questions from lecture 2, 15 questions addressing lecture 3. So once I see that one, if I click on any of those lectures, so that's what I see for every single question. So I see the questions, and I also see the key concepts that I created. So basically question 11, for example, in that case, is targeting a key concept called internal consistency. Whereas question 2 at the bottom, it is focusing on score interpretation in classical test theory. So again, this is a feature. These are called tags on eClass. So the eClass allows you to create these tags, and I call them key concepts, directly on your questions, and you can enter multiple key concepts as well. It doesn't have to be a single keyword or phrase. So, and I recommend that that key concept is as clear as possible so that people know when they read it, so they know what to study when they just go back to their slides or course materials. So once you are done, basically what happens is that you click on the Examist plugin. Examist plugin shows you something like this for the exam that you just created. You click on edit feedback, and it creates this binary feedback thing that I was just explaining earlier. So in my case, I said if students just do well in, do better than 80% on, let's say, lecture 1, so they will see this statement. It says, your performance in the items related to lecture 1 was great. Please review the list of key concepts, blah, blah, blah. It goes like this. If the student's performance is below 80%, in that particular content area, then they will see this, the opposite statement. It says your performance in the items related to lecture 1 was not sufficient. You should review the lecture notes. You can make this section as encouraging, as motivating as possible. That's totally up to you. So that box is literally gives you freedom to just type whatever you want to type, just to encourage your students to take the feedback and apply it to their learning. So once you are done with that process, basically you just wait for students to write the exam. By the way, this can be set up after students write the exam as well. So it doesn't have to be beforehand, but it always gives me some peace of mind when I just see this ahead of time and I know that my exam is good to go. But once the students just write it, so basically in this example, I had 15 students. So I click on this generate reports button on Examist. So it starts creating the reports. Depending on how many students you have, it starts creating the reports. It takes a while. So even for a class with like 200 students or so, it takes a couple of minutes and everything is just done. Then what happens is that you just let your students know that exam reports are available. They click on the same Examist plugin or button that you just added to your eClass page, and students see a report something like this. This is a report that I got from my fall course, ADP Wi-Fi for 7 last fall. So it says, or last winter, it shows the students' raw score, 82% on the top right corner on the first page. And what that raw score corresponds to, like in terms of raw scores, like 82%, or I believe it was like 40.75 out of 45 or something like that. That's what the score was. So students just see this radar chart, liquid fill charts, and bar charts, and things like that. Each chart has some text right next to it. So basically, you need to students can just read the explanation. So this textual part, the guidance, is helping them understand this graph, interpret the graphs better. So each graph is just giving them an idea about how they did in lecture 1, lecture 2, lecture 3, relative to their classmates. In this case, for example, like the purple represents the other students in the class, and blue represents the student himself or herself. So the student can just compare how they just did on lecture 1, 2, and 3 by himself or herself and relative to others. There are a couple of other figures. I only just gave you a snapshot of what they just see. They also see the classroom distributions based on this bubble chart at the end. So it shows that most of the students got between 80 to 85, and 70 to 75. There are fewer students like that. You just see that purple, those purple circles. So 90 to 95%, 95 to 100%. Probably there are fewer students in that group. So the size of the circle represents the number of students who fall into that category. So you can see yourself where you are. So which circle you are in, and you can see how others just did. Even though the point of that course may not be to compare you against other students, students still want to know where they are relative to others. And at the end of this report, again, you will see those key concepts. And in addition to key concepts, they will see those binary feedback statements that you just created. If they did it well, they get a positive one. If they did it worse than the threshold that you specified, they get an encouraging message that you just put in Examist. All right, so, and we've been trying this. So we've been already trying this before COVID just came in, but we've been also actively trying to use this, implement this in several courses during the 2020-2021 academic year. So in the fall, we just tried it in 2 courses, and one was an undergrad course with 2 sections. almost 200 students. Other one was my own course. It was a graduate level course for master's and PhD students. And in winter 2021, we expanded the application. So 3 courses from the nursing program. So the nursing department, they applied or they used ExamVis in their courses. And they used ExamVis in a different way. So they create a lot of formative assessments, the assessments that allow students to check their learning. So I believe that they are called learning checks in those courses. So the ExamVis was creating a report for each exam that they participated in, or each formative assessment. So I will show you some initial findings that we have. We administered a survey to students to learn what they think about ExamVis and how they help them learn better, or if it really helped them learn better. So that's what we wanted to find out. Our survey just showed that most of the students are really happy. So we looked at the log data as well. Nearly all of the students are looking at their reports. That's a good thing. So when you just let them know that there's feedback, so they go ahead, check it out, and students find it really helpful in that case. And we asked the students whether they are planning to use this information in their score reports to prepare for the subsequent exams. So most of them said yes. So again, the range is between 75 to 94% saying yes to this question in different across those courses that I showed you. And finally, again, we just showed the students this final question: do you think ExamVis has improved your learning in the course? Again, roughly 75 to 80% of the questions, students just said, yes, I like it. It has improved my learning. And I also had a chance to discuss these findings with the instructors as well, because instructors are literally using the system. So they are happy that students are benefiting from this feedback, timely, personalized, fast feedback, but also they are happy that now fewer students get really anxious when they see their exam results, because rather than just emailing you right away saying that, hey, I'm super unhappy about my exam results, so they look at the report and they calm down, I think. So after seeing how they did on the exam, and they know that at least they have an agenda, they have a plan to use before they go ahead and study for the final exam. And still, you will get few students every now and then who want to meet with you and discuss the exam individually. That's totally fine. But all I can say is that from my experience as well, so the percentage or proportion of students who want to come in and see you and go over the exam one by one with each question, it dropped significantly. So most students are totally fine with the reports, and they are happy with the feedback, and they tend to use it before they move to the final exam in the course. So I will just show you what we are planning to do next. Right now, we are investigating few research questions actively. We are using the log data on eClass to answer a bunch of questions, such as how frequently students access ExamVis. Sometimes students just go back and check their report multiple times. And whether ExamVis really affected their course activities, whether it helped them to just check out the materials that we just told them to look at. So that's that. And also we are looking at whether ExamVis improved their course performance. So we gave them some feedback, but did it really help them? So that's what we are investigating right now based on the data that we have collected. And in addition to these research questions, we are also working on some additional materials. So my students will be helping me on this. We are creating some additional materials to help instructors create better online assessments and how to use ExamVis along with those assessments at the same time. So we will put together an instructional module or series of instructional modules together over the summer. And we are hoping to share those materials with everybody on campus as early as possible, probably sometime in the fall, so that all the instructors who want to use ExamVis, or even if they don't want to use ExamVis, but they want to know how to create better online assessments, so they can at least learn from our experiences. So that's what we are hoping. And I'm hoping that maybe I can give this message as well. Maybe CTL would be willing to just share these materials through their website as well, because I'm really hoping that we just share our experiences as much as possible to help each other out during this process. And online assessments, even after COVID, they are not going to go anywhere. So they are with us, they will be with us, they will be even more common. So I think it's better to learn how to just create those assessments better. And hopefully what I just shared today and what I'm hoping to share later in the summer or early fall will help our instructors on campus with that goal. So that's kind of like the end of my presentation. Again, thank you for joining us this afternoon, and I'll be happy to take some questions about what I presented today. So thank you.